So if I was to ask you this question, what is the most important thing for you to focus on when it comes to return of serve? So when you're going to focus on returning the serve, no matter what level you are, even the pros, what are they focusing on? So would you say it's depth? Is it spin, a certain type of spin? Would it be position? Would it be a bit of everything? Would it be power? I'm going to go through all of these things so that when you finish this video, the next time you go to play, you're going to focus on this one thing. And we'll also look at the little nuances as well, so that we're going to decrease your risk. So in other words, risk versus reward. What is the most important thing when it comes to returning the serve that you need to focus on? Just this one thing. Stay with me. Okay, so what would be the most important thing it is for you to focus on when it comes to putting the most pressure onto the serving team when it comes to pickleball? Right, so the number one thing that you should be focusing on is depth. And why do I say depth? Why is depth the most important thing? As I said, whether you're a beginner, intermediate, or even a pro, putting depth into your return is the number one thing. Now, so you might think, well, what about power? What about spin? We'll get to that. Right, but putting depth into it. Now, let's have a look at it. Let's break this down. Why is depth so important? Well, first and foremost, when you hit your ball back to the serving team, it's going to keep them back. You know they can't volley, not like tennis. You know they can't run in, so keeping them back on that back line. So that's going to make it much harder for their third shot. So whether they're good at drops, it's obviously a lot harder when they're back at the baseline. So when you hit a long return, then whether they're going to do a drop or even a drive, it's a lot harder to create power from way back at the baseline. So whether it's a drop or a drive, they're going to have a lot harder time. So hitting it deep is going to be that number one thing, is going to make it harder for their third shot, whether it's a drop or a drive, as I say. But also, of course, it's going to give you more time to get in. So depending on how fast you are, so you might want to put a long floating ball or a looping ball to give you more time. So you don't want to hit it too hard. So these are the factors that you have to think about. And I'll go through these little nuances as well, because it might be a player can't handle your hard drive. So it still has to be deep, but it might be hard, or they might not be able to deal with the spin that you put on them. And we'll go through that. But number one thing, as I say, for your focus is, so if you're a real beginner, if you're just bunting the back, you're not very good at slice or top spin, that sort of thing, doesn't matter. All I want you to focus on is that back third of the court. Focus on that. So if you're bunting them, now if you're slower, hit them higher. You can even go to lobs, right? Just getting them deep is all you want to focus on, because then if you're slower, it's going to give you plenty of time to get up to the kitchen. Now, you might say, well, maybe I don't want to get up to the kitchen if you're a beginner. Well, you do, because again, if you're slow, getting up to the kitchen, giving yourself more time to get there, because if you stay back and you're slow on your feet, then they can drop it short and then you're doomed. So getting up to the kitchen is your number one priority for the vast majority of time, because then you can control the net. Again, you might say, well, I'm not really good on my feet, I can't get up there. But if you stay back, they can throw in drop shots. So you want to get up there, right? By hitting it looping or a slice. Again, I've been through these, but getting them long and deep. And again, if you hit them low and hard, it's going to give you less time to get there. So depth. So that's the one thing I want you to focus on the next time you go out there. Focus on depth. Now, you might say, well, what about spin? Well, that's just secondary things. So if you find that someone really can't handle a slice, then, and again, I've got videos on this, then you want to slice but deep, or maybe top spin. They're not very good on their backhand, so you start thinking about weaknesses. So you think, okay, well, deep and high to their backhand, or deep and high to their forehand. These sorts of things, but as I said, first priority is depth, and then you can start thinking about, okay, well, what about power? They're not very good at power. But remember, risk versus reward. So there's very little risk as long as you get it deep, and the reward is fantastic. As I say, it's going to be harder with their drops. It's going to be harder with their drives. But as long as you're getting it deep, you're going to put them under pressure. So, and then if you've got a great slice, you can then go deep again, if they can't handle that really laser guided slice backhand that you've got, for example, as long as you're getting it deep there and gives you plenty of time, they're going to have a hard time getting it back. So these are the things after depth that you can start thinking of. Or I say, whether it's looping to the weaker player, you can do that. Nice big top spin, so they get problems with their backhand. But again, your number one focus is depth. And then you start thinking about, what about power? What about spin? Those are the things you think about secondarily to depth, okay? Now, what about placement? Should you go out wide? Should you go down the lines? Let's have a look at that as well. So, number one, I would say, again, factors, again, we're not talking about weak players, that sort of thing, but if you just say for the moment that both players are basically the same standard, then what I suggest is deep and to the middle. Now, why is that? So if you go deep into the middle, one, you're pinning both players back, and two, you can start to give some confusion. Is that mine? Is that yours? So you can start getting the little bit of confusion between the two, but it also cuts off their angles as well. Because if you go down the side there, then they might be able to hit something cross court, or they come back down the line. So you're cutting off angles, creating confusion, and you're pinning them both back. So that's a really good spot. So in a nutshell, if you were to say, okay, I'm going to hit all of my returns deep to the center, you're going to be absolutely golden. Now, what if they hit something out wide to you? So they serve it and it goes out wide. Where should you hit it back then? Well, you already know deep, but should you try and go for something down the line? No. What you want to do is, again, all factors considered, unless you were targeting the weaker player, but generally what you want to be doing is looping it back. So if we're going out wide out here, is giving yourself the most amount of time to get back into position. So they've thrown you out wide. What you want to do is loop it back into this opposite corner. Why? Because the least amount of risk, because you've got plenty of court to play with, and also gives you much more time to get back to your position. Because if you try to go for a low percentage shot down the line, they throw you out wide and you've got to try and slam it down the line, for example, then you're out of court. If they're any good, they can just hit it back. You've left all that court open because you've been pushed out wide. Doesn't give you time to get back in there. Not to mention the fact that you're putting yourself at risk by trying for a line down the line. The best spot for you to go is just get it back across the opposite side. Gives you much more time, lowers your risk, and then you get back into your position. Okay, so what do we got? We got depth, and then you start considering spin and power, weaknesses with players, those sorts of things, and height, of course. But think at the very minimum, deep to the center is going to be your lowest risk, and you see your best risk versus reward shot. Next time you go out and play, stay focusing on just getting your returns deep. Now again, whether you've got topspin, whether you've got slice, or whether you just bunt them back, that's all you need to focus on. Getting that depth there, and then you're going to see that you're going to win a whole lot more points. You're not going to be putting them to net because you're trying to do something high risk, like hitting it really hard and hitting into the net, or hitting them long. Just whatever that is for you to get that deep is what you want to focus on. And you're going to win so many more points because you're going to put them under pressure. They're going to be way back to try and hit some sort of hard drive, or they're going to try and drop back like that. And then, as I say, secondarily to that, if you find they can't handle your slice, then slice deep or high top spin deep. All of these sorts of things, factor them in after you've focused on depth, and that's all I want you to focus on, and you watch how many points you're going to win.